Have you ever noticed how the loudest room you will ever walk into is the one inside your own head? You say something simple, and hours later, you are still dissecting every single word. You lie awake in the dark, replaying a conversation that ended long ago. You twist it, turn it, and suddenly, innocent words feel dangerous. A slight pause from a friend becomes proof that they are upset. A brief message from a coworker feels like a quiet judgment. If you have ever felt emotionally exhausted by your own mind, caught in a heavy loop of imagined arguments and silent fears, this is for you. Stay until the end, because the final lesson may change the way you see this pain forever. The mind is a deeply strange place. When we feel uncertain or vulnerable, the mind tries to protect us by analyzing everything. It pulls up every recent interaction, examining the tone of voice, the look in someone's eye, the slight hesitation before they answered. But instead of bringing clarity, this endless replaying only builds a fortress of anxiety. We create entirely new, painful scenarios that never even happened. We fight exhausting battles in the shower. We defend ourselves to empty rooms. We let the ghosts of yesterday steal the quiet of today. Buddhist wisdom teaches us about the restless nature of the human mind, a mind that swings rapidly from thought to thought, grasping at worries and chewing on memories. Buddhism reminds us that most of our suffering does not come from the actual events of our lives, but from our tight attachment to the story we tell ourselves about those events. We suffer not because of the conversation we had, but because we refuse to let the conversation end. Imagine a heavy stone dropped into a quiet lake. The stone falls, breaking the surface with a small splash, and then it sinks silently to the bottom. That is the actual event, the conversation, the brief interaction. It is over in a second. But the ripples? The ripples keep spreading outward, disturbing the water long after the stone is gone. Your overthinking is not the stone. It is the refusal to let the ripples settle. You keep splashing the water with your own hands, and then you wonder why you cannot see your reflection clearly. We do this constantly in our modern lives. A text message goes unanswered for a few hours, and our mind immediately writes a tragedy. We speak up in a meeting, and for the next 3 days, we silently punish ourselves for sounding foolish. We try to read the minds of people who are barely paying attention. We give all our vital energy to shadows. Think about your own life. Ask yourself right now, what conversation are you still replaying? Who are you secretly arguing with in the silence of your mind? And most importantly, is this thought bringing you peace, or is it feeding your fear? Pause. Breathe. You do not have to figure it all out right now. Observe the thought without following it down the dark hallway. When the memory of that awkward conversation rises again, do not fight it, but do not invite it to stay either. Let the thought pass like a gray cloud drifting across a vast, open sky. You are not your thoughts. You are the quiet sky behind them. When you stop feeding the echoes, the silence naturally returns. But letting go of the desperate need to mentally fix what has already happened is only the first step. It requires us to look at why we keep rewinding the tape in the first place. And this is where the next truth begins. Because beneath every imagined argument is a deeply hidden desire to control what we cannot change. 2. The illusion of fixing the past. Here is the truth few people want to face. The tighter you hold on to a memory, the more it hurts you. We do not replay uncomfortable conversations because we enjoy the pain. We replay them because we secretly believe that if we think about them long enough, hard enough, and from enough different angles, we can somehow change what happened. We treat the past like a broken object we can repair. We sit in silence, rewriting the script of our own lives. I should have said this. If only I had stayed quiet. If I had just explained it this way, they would have understood. We construct perfect defenses and flawless arguments for a moment that no longer exists. We try to control the past by dragging it aggressively into the present, but the past cannot be controlled. It can only be carried. And right now, you are carrying it like a tremendous weight. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is the reality of impermanence. Everything comes into being, and everything naturally passes away. The spoken word is exactly like the wind. Once it leaves the lips, it is gone forever. Suffering arises when we refuse to accept this flowing, passing nature of life. We suffer deeply because we cling to the illusion that we can pause time, rewind the tape, and edit the scene. But attachment to an echo will only leave you with empty, tired hands. Imagine standing by the side of a fast-moving river. The water rushes past you, carrying leaves and branches downstream toward the ocean. Replaying a past conversation is like standing on the muddy bank, frantically reaching into the water, trying to catch a specific leaf that drifted by an hour ago. You cannot reach it. It is already miles away. The harder you reach, the more you thrash in the water, the more exhausted you become. All you manage to do is stir up the mud at your feet. The river has moved on. Only you are still standing there, fighting the current. We exhaust ourselves this way every single day. We replay a tense meeting at work, dissecting every expression our colleagues made. We turn over the last words of a fading friendship, hoping to find a hidden meaning that will make the ending hurt a little less. We obsess over a tiny, awkward mistake we made, convinced that everyone around us is still thinking about it. We waste the precious, breathing hours of our actual lives, trying to fix a phantom life that only exists in our memory. Ask yourself right now, what fading leaf are you still trying to pull from the river? What are you afraid will happen if you simply let it go? Do you silently believe that if you stop worrying about it, you will lose your only shield? Pause. Breathe. You cannot unsay the words. You cannot force someone to understand your heart if they are not ready. Do your part, then release the outcome. Drop your hands to your sides. Step back from the muddy edge of the river, because peace is not something you chase by solving the past. It is something you make space for by finally leaving the past alone. But leaving the past behind is difficult when your mind starts inventing new threats in the silence. And this is where the next truth begins. 3. The danger of phantom words. What if the words hurting you the most were never actually spoken? Here is a difficult reality. When we overthink a conversation, we do not just replay what happened. We edit it. We add new weight to simple sentences. We read devastating meaning into a short pause. We take a perfectly ordinary reply and twist it until it feels like a rejection. We start fighting against phantom words, words that were never said, but that our insecurities have convinced us are real. We become terrified of the silence between people, rushing to fill the empty gaps with our own deepest fears. Buddhist wisdom teaches us to be deeply aware of the mind's incredible power to project illusions. In Buddhist thought, there is a famous teaching about a man walking down a dark road. He sees a deadly snake coiled on the path ahead. His heart races, his body fills with panic, and he suffers immensely in that moment. But as the sun rises and the light touches the path, he realizes the snake was never real. It was only a piece of coiled rope. The danger was entirely constructed by his mind, but the pain he felt was absolutely real. Our phantom words are the coiled rope. When we feel insecure or overwhelmed, we look at the quiet behavior of others and see deadly snakes. We see harsh judgment where there is only distraction. We see profound anger where there is only ordinary tiredness. Imagine a single candle burning in a quiet, dark room. If you place a small object near the flame, it casts a massive, terrifying shadow against the wall. The object itself is tiny, harmless, but the shadow it creates feels dark, looming, and dangerous. Your overthinking mind is the candle. It takes a tiny, harmless interaction and projects a massive, terrifying shadow across the walls of your mind. You spend your days fighting the shadow, completely forgetting about the small, quiet truth sitting on the table. We see this everywhere in our modern lives. You send a message to a friend, and their reply is shorter than you expected. Immediately, the shadow grows. You assume you did something wrong. You assume they are finally tired of you. You assume your connection is fracturing. But what if they were just busy? What if they were simply walking into a noisy room or holding a cup of coffee in one hand? What if the coiled rope is really just a rope? Think about your own life. Ask yourself right now, how many times have you broken your own heart over a story you completely invented? What heavy, hidden meanings are you attaching to someone else's simple silence? Pause. Breathe. Look at the situation exactly as it is, without adding your own shadows to it. Stop fighting the phantom words. Stop assuming that every quiet moment is a secret judgment against your worth. Let the silence simply be silence, because inner peace is not found by successfully guessing what everyone else is thinking. It is found by realizing that you do not need to know. But to stop creating these towering shadows, we must first learn how to calm the wildfire that casts them. And this is where the next truth begins. 4. Taming the restless mind. What if the harder you try to force your mind to be quiet, the louder it screams? Here is a frustrating reality. When we are caught in a spiral of overthinking, our first instinct is usually to fight it. We lie in bed, exhausted, staring at the ceiling, and we angrily command our brains to shut down. We demand peace. We tell ourselves to stop worrying. We get furious at our own inability to let things go. But trying to aggressively force a restless mind into a state of calm is like trying to smooth out rough water by hitting it with a flat board. You do not create a glass-like surface. You only create more waves. You become held hostage by your own desperate need for silence. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that the mind can never be conquered through force. You cannot bully your own thoughts into submission. Buddhism often refers to this restless, jumping state as the monkey mind, a mind that swings wildly from the branch of memory to the branch of fear, never stopping to rest. The spiritual practice is not to aggressively chop down the tree to stop the movement. The practice is gentle observation. It is allowing the mind to wander without chasing after it, knowing that eventually, without fuel, the swinging will stop. Imagine a small bird trapped inside a cage. The bird is terrified. It flutters frantically from side to side, hitting its wings against the metal bars. Exhausting itself in a desperate attempt to escape, it is trying so incredibly hard to fight its way out of the panic that it fails to see. One simple truth: the door to the cage is wide open. If the bird would just stop thrashing, just for one quiet moment, it could simply walk out into the open air. But its own frantic fighting keeps it trapped. We do exactly this when we are caught in mental loops. An unexpected email arrives late at night, and immediately our mind begins to thrash. We panic about our job, our security, our reputation. We try to force ourselves to sleep, which only makes us more awake. We try to suppress the anxiety, which only makes it stronger. We fight the bars of the cage, completely exhausted by our own frantic mental fluttering, ignoring the open door of the present moment sitting right in front of us. Think about your own life. Ask yourself right now, are you secretly waging a war against your own thoughts? Are you constantly punishing yourself for not being perfectly calm? What would happen if you simply stopped fighting the noise? Pause, breathe, stop thrashing against the bars. You do not have to forcefully push your anxious thoughts away. Let the feeling rise without making it your identity. Watch the thought swing past you like a wild animal, but do not invite it in for tea. Let the storm pass without becoming the storm. You cannot wage a violent war against your own mind and expect to win inner peace. True calm is never forced. It naturally returns the moment you stop fighting the waves. But stepping back from this mental war requires us to abandon the heavy burden of deciding who is right and who is wrong. And this is where the next truth begins. 5. Closing the courtroom in your head. What if the most exhausting trial you will ever face is the one where you are both the judge and the accused? Here is a painful reality. When a conversation leaves us feeling exposed or misunderstood, we do not just replay it, we put it on trial. We build a silent courtroom in our minds. We gather evidence. We defend our words, our tone, our intentions. We fiercely cross-examine the other person's silence. We obsess over proving that we were justified, or we ruthlessly punish ourselves for saying the wrong thing. We spend our precious energy trying to secure a final verdict that will somehow make the uncomfortable feelings go away. Buddhist wisdom teaches us about the heavy burden of the ego. The ego desperately wants to be right. It wants to be perfectly understood, validated, and proven innocent. But Buddhism reminds us that clinging to our rigid views, even when we are entirely justified, is a primary source of human suffering. Holding on to a burning desire to prove your point is like holding a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. As long as you are fighting to win an argument in your mind, you are choosing to stay in the fire. Imagine standing in a dark, narrow hallway, facing a heavy, locked door. You pound your fists against the solid wood, demanding that the door open. You want the person on the other side to apologize. You want them to hear your side of the story. You want a final resolution. Your hands become bruised, your voice goes hoarse, and you exhaust your entire spirit standing at that door. But here is the hidden truth. The door is not keeping you trapped. You are keeping yourself trapped in the dark hallway simply by refusing to turn around and walk away. We lose years of our lives standing at these locked doors. A relationship ends without a proper apology, and we replay the betrayal every night. We clash with a difficult family member, and we write long, defensive speeches in our heads that we will never actually speak. We feel unfairly judged at work, and we spend our weekends mentally arguing with people who are completely unaware of our pain. We want the last word. We want them to finally see our worth. Think about your own life. Ask yourself right now, whose apology are you still desperately waiting for? What unseen verdict are you trying to win in the silent courtroom of your mind? Pause. Breathe. You do not need to win the argument to find your peace. You do not have to force the door open. Step away from the wood. Stop defending yourself to an empty room. Let the case remain unsolved. Release the desperate need to be perfectly understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Because true peace is never found by finally proving your point. It is found by realizing that the point no longer matters. But walking away from the defense stand means you must learn how to handle the sudden, uncomfortable space that follows a conflict. And this is where the next truth begins. 6. The space between action and reaction. What if the most powerful thing you can do when you feel panicked is absolutely nothing? Here is a difficult reality. When a conversation leaves us feeling anxious, exposed, or misunderstood, our immediate instinct is to act. We feel a sudden rush of discomfort, and we desperately want to fix it right now. If a friend's text seems slightly cold, we instantly reply with a joke to test the waters. If we feel awkward after a meeting, we send an unnecessary email to over-explain our point. We panic in the silence. We rush to fill the empty gaps, apologizing when we have done nothing wrong, simply because we cannot stand the tension. We let the immediate burning emotion dictate our next move, and we almost always regret it later. Buddhist wisdom teaches us the immense power of the sacred pause. In Buddhist thought, mindfulness is not just about sitting quietly on a cushion. It is about creating a tiny, powerful space between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. It is the breath between the action and the reaction. Buddhism reminds us that much of our unnecessary suffering is born in our blind, impulsive reactions to uncomfortable feelings. We react out of fear, and in doing so, we only multiply the fear. Imagine a glass jar filled with water and heavy mud. When you violently shake the jar, the water becomes totally dark and cloudy. You cannot see through it. If you panic and try to fix the cloudy water by shaking the jar even more, or by sticking your hands inside to pull the dirt out, you only make the water worse. You keep the dirt swirling. The only way to clear the water is to set the jar down, to step back, to do absolutely nothing. You must let it sit in perfect silence until the mud naturally settles to the bottom on its own. We constantly shake the jar in our daily lives. You have a tense disagreement with your partner, and instead of taking a quiet hour to let the anger cool, you keep sending paragraphs of desperate defense. You feel a sudden sting of rejection from a social group, and instead of letting the feeling pass, you immediately seek outside validation to prove your worth. We are terrified of the cloudy water. We are terrified of letting the mud settle, so we keep frantically shaking our own lives. Think about your own life. Ask yourself right now, how many times have you made a painful situation worse simply because you could not tolerate the uncomfortable silence? What are you truly afraid will happen if you just stop shaking the jar? Pause. Breathe. When the panic rises, do not reach for your phone. Do not rush to fill the quiet with desperate words. Do not let your fear make your decisions for you. The space between the event and your reaction is where your freedom lives. Let the mud settle. Let the uncomfortable feeling exist in your body for a few minutes without demanding an immediate resolution. You do not have to respond to everything right away. You are allowed to stand back and let the water clear. Because true clarity never comes when the mind is violently thrashing. It only arrives when you have the courage to be still. But finding the courage to be still requires us to release one of our deepest human fears. And this is where the next truth begins. 7. The freedom of being misunderstood. What if there is a strange, unexpected peace waiting for you the moment you finally stop trying to explain yourself? Here is a painful reality. We spend an enormous amount of our life energy desperately trying to manage our image in the minds of other people. When a conversation ends awkwardly, we panic because we fear we left the wrong impression. We hate the idea that someone might think we are unkind, foolish, or wrong. We fear being painted as the villain in someone else's story, so we over-explain. We send the long, careful follow-up message. We twist ourselves into emotional knots, trying to guarantee that their perception of us matches our own good intentions. We tie our profound sense of worth to how accurately the world sees us. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that you can never truly control the internal world of another human being. In Buddhist thought, everyone views reality through the heavily colored lens of their own past, their own fears, and their own conditioning. When someone misunderstands you, they are rarely seeing you at all. They are interacting with a projection of their own mind, clinging to the desperate desire to be perfectly understood by everyone, a profound source of suffering, because it places your inner peace in hands that do not belong to you. Imagine a bright, full moon shining high over a dark lake. When the water is completely calm, the reflection of the moon is sharp and perfect. But if a storm arrives and the water becomes violent and choppy, the reflection of the moon shatters into 1,000 distorted pieces. The moon does not panic. The moon does not dive into the freezing, rough water, desperately trying to piece its reflection back together. It simply stays quiet in the vast sky. It knows its own true shape. It knows its own light. It allows the water to be chaotic. Knowing that the water does not change the truth of the sky, we forget to be the moon in our modern lives. A co-worker misinterprets our simple words, and we frantically try to fix the reflection. A relationship fades, and we are absolutely devastated that they might be telling a different version of the breakup. We exhaust ourselves trying to control what people think of us, especially people who are deeply committed to misunderstanding us. We dive into the choppy water of other people's opinions, trying to force their waves to be still. Think about your own life. Ask yourself right now, whose chaotic water are you currently trying to fix? Why are you allowing their distorted reflection of you to dictate your own sense of worth? Pause. Breathe. Let them misunderstand you. You do not have to correct the record. You do not have to prove your goodness to someone determined to see you as flawed. Let them have their version of the story. Stop diving into the cold water. Release the heavy, exhausting burden of managing your reflection. Because the moment you accept that you cannot control how others see you, you take your power back from the echoing walls of your own mind. You step out of the imagined conversations and you finally look around at the actual, breathing world waiting for you. And this is where the final truth begins. 8. Returning to the only life you have. You are lying in the dark again. The room is quiet. But this time, when the echo of that past conversation tries to pull you back into the labyrinth of overthinking, you do not follow it. You feel the familiar, heavy pull. You feel the intense temptation to analyze, to defend, to fix the phantom words. But instead, you gently exhale. You recognize the coiled rope for exactly what it is. Because this is the ultimate truth of letting go. All those exhausting hours spent in the silent courtroom of your mind did not change the past. They only stole your present. You cannot force the river to run backward, to catch a leaf that has already drifted away. You cannot control your reflection in someone else's chaotic water. And for the first time in a very long time, you realize you do not need to. Imagine a person walking out of a dark, closed theater into the bright, warm sunlight. For so long, you have been sitting in the dark, watching a painfully distorted movie of your own interactions on repeat. You memorized every uncomfortable line. You winced at every scene. But the movie is not real life. The movie is just light and shadows projected against a blank wall. Real life is the sun on your face, the breath in your lungs, the feeling of the solid ground beneath your feet. It is time to step out of the theater. When you finally stop chasing the echoes, you will discover a profound, untouched silence waiting for you. This silence is not empty. It is full of presence. It is the quiet space where you can finally rebuild your trust in yourself. Stripped of the desperate need for outside approval, we spend an enormous amount of our vital energy preparing for imagined battles, constantly reliving moments that have already passed, that we completely forget to live the one life we actually have. The breath moving through your chest right now, the quietness of your room, the simple, ordinary beauty of this exact second. This is where your real life is happening. It is not happening in the fading memory of what you said yesterday. It is not happening in the fear of how you will be perceived tomorrow. It is only happening right here, right now. Think about your own life. Ask yourself right now, how much of today have you missed because you were mentally trapped in yesterday? Pause. Breathe. Forgive yourself for being human. Forgive yourself for the clumsy words, the awkward pauses, and the times you held on too tightly because you were afraid of the silence. You are not a problem to be solved, and your mind is not an enemy to be defeated. You are simply a person learning how to walk through a noisy world with a much quieter heart. Let the past conversations rest. You survived them. Let the phantom words fade into the empty air where they belong. Turn your attention back to your hands, your breath, your actual surroundings. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You can let go now.